I've tested somewhere north of 30 coffee products over the last few years for this channel, and if my kitchen flooded tomorrow and I had to rebuild the entire setup from zero, only 5 of those products would make the list back into my cart. Not the 5 most expensive. Not the 5 with the flashiest spec sheets. The 5 that survived actual daily use long enough to prove the marketing copy either right or wrong. Price doesn't measure quality. Repetition does, and repetition is the one test no showroom can fake. Here's why this list matters more than a typical buying guide. The coffee industry sells gear the same way gyms sell memberships in January, with language aimed at your aspirations, not your actual morning routine. Barista grade, commercial quality, engineered for consistency, phrases that sound like guaranteed results, but often just describe a feature nobody uses past week 3. I'm not rebuilding a fantasy setup here. I'm rebuilding the one that survives a groggy 6 a.m. hand and still produces a good cup on day 900. The first thing back in my cart is a burr grinder, specifically the Baratza Encore ESP, at $199.99, and here's the marketing claim worth testing. That consistent grind particle size matters more than any other single variable in cup quality, more than the brewer, more than the beans themselves. I ran this grinder against a $35 blade grinder for 2 weeks, brewing identical beans on identical settings, and measured extraction consistency using a refractometer to check total dissolved solids across 10 consecutive cups from each machine. Here's where the claim holds completely. The Baratza produced a TDS range of just 0.08% variance across 10 cups, while the blade grinder swung by more than 0.6%, meaning some cups were noticeably under-extracted and sour, while others were bitter and over-extracted, from the exact same beans. The catch isn't a flaw in the Baratza. It's a warning about the blade grinder. No brewing method, no matter how expensive, can fix inconsistent grind size feeding into it. Verdict: the grinder isn't one component among many, it's the one piece of gear that makes every other purchase on this list actually function as intended. The second item is a gooseneck kettle with temperature control, specifically the Fellow Stag EKG, at $165, and the marketing claim is precision. Hold water at an exact target temperature so you're never guessing whether you're scalding delicate light roast beans or under-extracting a dark roast. I tested this against a standard stovetop kettle using an infrared thermometer, timing how long each took to reach and hold 205 degrees Fahrenheit. Here's where the spec sheet earns its price. The Stag held that temperature within 1 degree for the full pour, every time, across 20 tested pours, while eyeballing a stovetop kettle produced swings of up to 15 degrees, depending on how long it sat before pouring. Here's the honest catch. For anyone using a fully automatic drip machine that already regulates its own water temperature internally, this kettle solves a problem you don't actually have, and its real value is specifically for manual pour-over methods where you're the one controlling the water. Verdict: transformative for manual brewing, completely unnecessary if you're not doing pour-over. The third item is a digital coffee scale with a built-in timer, specifically the Akaya Pearl at $150. And the claim is that weighing coffee and water, rather than eyeballing scoops, is the single fastest upgrade to consistency available. I tested this by brewing the same recipe, a 1:16 coffee-to-water ratio, using a standard tablespoon scoop for 1 week and the Akaya scale for a second week, then compared cup-to-cup taste consistency across both. Here's where it gets interesting rather than falling apart. The scoop method produced actual dose variance of up to 3 grams per cup, nearly a 20% swing on a typical 15-gram dose, while the scale kept every dose within 0.2 grams. Here's the one legitimate catch. At $150, you're paying a real premium for the built-in timer and Bluetooth app connectivity, features that a $35 kitchen scale accurate to 1 gram will replicate for the core function at a fraction of the price. Verdict: the precision this category demands is real. The $150 price tag for it is mostly optional. Here's the cost per use math worth sitting with for a second, because gear purchases feel expensive until you spread them across actual use. That $199.99 grinder, used daily for 5 years, works out to roughly 11 cents a day, and it's replacing pre-ground coffee that loses measurable aromatic compounds within 15 minutes of grinding, according to peer-reviewed flavor chemistry research on coffee off-gassing. 11 cents a day for a fresher cup every single morning is not the expensive option here. The expensive option is buying a new bag of stale pre-ground coffee every 2 weeks, because the first bag never tasted as good as the shelf display promised. The fourth item is a manual pour-over dripper, specifically the Hario V60, at $22 for the ceramic version. and the claim is deceptively simple. A $22 piece of cone-shaped ceramic can outperform a $300 automatic drip machine on flavor clarity. I brewed identical beans, identical grind, identical water temperature, through both the V60 and a mid-range $180 automatic drip machine, then ran blind taste tests with 4 other testers. Here's where the cheap product actually wins outright. 3 of 4 testers preferred the V60's cup, describing it as brighter and more distinct in flavor separation, since the manual pour allows full control over bloom time and pour rate that an automatic machine standardizes into a single generic pattern. Here's the catch, and it's about you, not the product. The V60 demands your full attention for 4 minutes every morning, and if you're not willing to stand at the counter pouring in slow circles before your coffee, an automatic machine will still outperform your inconsistent version of manual brewing every time. Verdict: better than an automatic machine only in the hands of someone actually willing to use it properly. The 5th and final item is unglamorous enough that most buying guides skip it entirely: an airtight coffee storage canister with a one-way CO2 valve, specifically the Fellow Atmos at $50 for the steel version. The claim is that vacuum-sealed storage meaningfully extends bean freshness, compared to the bag it ships in. I stored the same bag of beans split between the original packaging and the Atmos canister, testing aroma intensity and TDS extraction at the 2-week mark. Here's where the claim holds up cleanly. Beans from the Atmos canister still measured within 0.05% TDS of their day 1 baseline at 2 weeks, while the beans left in a clipped-shut bag had already dropped noticeably in extraction yield and aromatic intensity by the same point. Here's the catch. If you're buying small bags and finishing them within a week, which is genuinely the better habit regardless of storage gear, this canister is solving a freshness problem you weren't going to have anyway. Verdict: essential for anyone buying beans in bulk, irrelevant for anyone buying small and drinking fast. Before pulling this together, here's exactly how each of these 5 earned a permanent spot, instead of the dozens of other products I've tested and returned. The first criterion was measurable consistency, meaning whether a tool actually reduces cup-to-cup variance or just claims to. The second was whether the price reflects genuine engineering, or mostly pays for a feature you won't use past the first month. The third was cost spread across realistic years of daily use, not the sticker shock of the upfront number. The fourth was whether the product's benefit depends on your own behavior changing to use it correctly, since even great gear underperforms in careless hands. An independent coffee equipment reviewer I've spoken with for previous testing, who evaluates gear professionally for a specialty coffee trade publication, told me almost exactly what my own 5-product list keeps confirming. The biggest mistake home coffee drinkers make isn't choosing the wrong machine, it's buying an expensive machine to compensate for an inconsistent grinder sitting right next to it. That matches precisely why the grinder sits first on this list rather than last. If you're deciding where to actually spend money first, get the Baratza Encore ESP at $199.99 before anything else on this list, since it's the one piece of gear every other purchase depends on. Get the Fellow Stag EKG at $165, only if you're brewing manually rather than running a fully automatic machine that already controls its own temperature. Get a basic digital scale, even a $35 one, before paying $150 for the Akaya, unless the built-in timer and app genuinely matter to your routine. Get the Hario V60 at $22, only if you're honestly willing to stand at the counter for 4 focused minutes each morning. And skip it entirely if you know that's not realistically happening on a Tuesday at 6:15. And get the Fellow Atmos canister at $50, only if you're buying beans in bulk rather than in small, fast-consumed bags. What this rebuild revealed isn't that expensive coffee gear is a waste of money. It's that the 5 things actually worth keeping were never the flashiest items on any list, they were the ones that kept proving themselves long after the unboxing excitement wore off. Price doesn't measure quality, repetition does. Tell me which of these 5 you already own, and which one, the grinder, the kettle, the scale, the V60, or the canister, you'd cut first if you had to rebuild on a tighter budget than mine.